Well, welcome to this breakout session. My name is Ken McGill. As I already mentioned, I work at Opeeka, and I'm truly honored to co-facilitate this session with Kathleen. Kathleen is an amazing person I just met, and she embodies what TCOM is all about. And I've actually attended and presented at the last 16 conferences, and during which time I've met amazing individuals and people from all over the world. And this particular session is just going to be just another layer of this whole process of meeting people who want to make a difference. However, this particular session is going to be on one which assists in supporting recovery, save lives, and hopefully play a significant role in putting an end to the opioid epidemic. And when I met Kathleen and when she shared her life-saving work and what she's doing in Ninilchik, Alaska, and throughout Alaska, we really just began to share our journeys, and she sought to seek a solution for something that just didn't seem solvable. And when I think of Kathleen, I think of her as someone who embodies this innovative spirit and allows for the support of collaborations, especially among systems. And just my quick talk on this here, then I'm going to mute myself, but I'm going to monitor the chat and maybe add maybe one or two more things. For those who are using the TCOM tools, whether it be used in care planning for youth or adults, this is going to be connected to rating the substance use item, and others can be certainly rated here. But specifically, our discussion today will be in the action category of ratings. So when we talk about opioid addiction, the rating would be 3. And we think about the intensive need for immediate interaction and intervention. That's exactly what Kathleen is going to share. So I will absolutely be less talkative today and more listening and learning. And it really is my pleasure to turn it over to Kathleen.
Hi, thank you for the nice introduction, Ken. Hi, it's very nice to be here with all of you. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the afternoon to see this presentation, learn more about assistive technologies for treating substance use disorders. My name is Kathleen Totemoff. I live in Ninilchik, Alaska. I'm the Medication Assisted Treatment Project Director and Grant Manager for our local community clinic. And I've been working in this job for the last 4 years. And my work background is very eclectic. I've been an adjunct with the University of Alaska for the past 11 years, worked in in-home and in-school behavioral intervention, residential treatment, rural economic development. So the world of MET was new to me. When I saw the job opening, I didn't know what medication assisted treatment was. I just thought the job sounded interesting. So what I did was I looked into what it was, what we were attempting to solve. And I figured by the time I learn enough, if this seems like something that I think I could do and something that I would enjoy doing, I'd go ahead and apply for it if it was still there. And it was. So 4 years later, here I am. And just a little bit of background, there's a goat on the screen because we have 3 Nigerian dwarf goats. This is Princess, she's one of them. We have geese, chickens, bees, rabbits. We've had pigs before. So we're pretty rural where we are. I'm also a mom of 2 special needs kids. We were living in a very rural village community in the Kodiak Archipelago when they were born. And about 10 years before they were born, I had actually been doing in-home behavioral intervention with a little boy who had autism. And we were trained in ABA and discrete trial and all of these things. And we had a really great treatment team. Everybody was very well trained, but I never saw the progress that I was hoping to see. I didn't make the progress as readily as I did with the other kids I worked with who had disabilities or different types of mental illness. So when we realized that our kids had developed autism, very severe autism, I didn't want to go the standard route. I started there had to be an answer somewhere. So I just started tearing on the internet and opening books. What is there? We were looking at diet, we were looking at supplements, we were looking at the environment, water filters, you name it. And we were able to construct a treatment plan individualized for both of them that has worked very, very well. So we kept the components of traditional autism treatments that I thought were effective and found customized things that I thought would address the needs of both of our kids individually. And we're not out of the woods. They're still on the spectrum, but our son can read, he can have conversations, he's learning to play electric guitar. Our daughter didn't say her first word till she was 3.5, and now she can say, "Mommy, I love you," and it makes me cry every time she says it. So progress can be made no matter how hopeless or helpless the situation might become. There's an answer out there somewhere. So when I got into this line of work and I was talking to people who were in different stages of recovery, or parents who had adult kids who were struggling, or parents who had even lost their kids to addiction, I could understand that as a mom who's worried about their kids, and they need answers for their families just like I needed answers for mine. So I was very happy to have an opportunity to get this funding from SAMHSA to include different assistive technologies, because there are still gaps, there are still barriers, and we're going to go over some of the ways we're going to help address some of those needs in the course of this presentation.
And so when I said that you embodied, you put just amazing words and actions that you've done, and so thank you. This is an honor.
I'm very happy to have met Ken, and he's introduced me to so many great people just in the short few weeks that we've known each other. So I'm happy to collaborate. This is fantastic. And we have just a few learning objectives. I hope you take away more than just these few things, but essentially we're going to be identifying how to rate the use of assistive technologies in medication-assisted treatment, objectively defining assisted medical technologies in the treatment of substance use disorders, and identifying the benefits of incorporating a variety of assistive technologies to support people throughout the entire continuum of care. So I don't have any conflicts to disclose.
Me neither.
So this ad right here, this is your brain, this is drugs, this is your brain on drugs. For those of us who saw this campaign back in the day, we probably remember it. But the question is, was it effective on the war on drugs? Did this actually help lower the number of people who were using drugs or dying of overdose? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. We can see right here that in 1999, the US had about 17,000 overdose deaths, and that increased to more than 90,000 in the year 2020. And those numbers continue to climb, with nearly 110 overdose deaths last year, and even more expected by the end of this year. So we know that's a lot of people, but just to put it in perspective, let's take a moment to compare the number of American lives lost during a recent single year from drug overdose to the number of American lives lost during the 20 years of the Vietnam War. With the continued annual increase in drug overdose deaths in 2022, we are on track of approaching the equivalent of 2 Vietnam Wars. So in the United States, we are locking up a lot of people. Last year, 500,000 were incarcerated on drug charges. This is more than all prisoners held for all crimes in Western Europe, even though our population is about 100 million fewer people. The United States is also spending a lot of money. The war on drugs was launched in 1971 with a budget of $100 million. In 2021, that cost ballooned into a whopping $41 billion. So what we've seen in the last few slides is that more people are dying every year, more people are being incarcerated, and we're spending more and more money to solve the problem. So to quote Dr. Phil, how is that working?
Not too good.
Not too good. So it really is time to change our approach. If you're not that familiar with medication-assisted treatment, it is considered the gold standard in treating substance use disorders. It is the combination of FDA-approved medications with counseling and behavioral therapies to provide more of a whole patient approach to treatment. But we can build on the strengths of MET and address those remaining gaps and barriers to more successfully help people recover. We need to take what we have that's working and adapt it into something that's more innovative to really meet the needs of the people we serve. And the superheroes who are going to help us get there are the providers who incorporate the use of assistive technologies into their programs. So I've been promoting the use of assistive technologies for at least a couple of years now, and I always get asked the same question: why would I need these things? Why would my patients want to use them? What's the real benefit here? And first off, it is going to save us money. We're spending a lot as it is, But if we can save some money and put it towards things that work more effectively, we can reinvest that in other areas to further support the needs of the people that we're trying to serve. Secondly, it's going to help us reduce the number of patients who relapse and end up back in corrections. It's going to help providers use their time more effectively. And adding the use of technologies into treatment not only helps the person receiving care, but also their families and their communities. Because when we are able to get that person what they need, they can provide more safety and stability for their kids, which helps them have a brighter future. And that's going to be the first step in helping us to break that substance misuse cycle. So as Ken went over the TCOM ratings earlier, we learned that a rating of 3 means that an immediate or intensive action is required. And the situation with opioids and drugs in general, it's about as dire as it can get right now. So we really need to do something effective, and we need to do it right now. So incorporating technology as part of the new MAT model. The benefits of including this, we're going to have improved transitions throughout the entire recovery process. We can help transition people from active use into treatment through different stages of the recovery, and also help people transition out of treatment. We can monitor their treatment adherence, and we can give them access to tools and supports 24/7. So there are a lot of different technologies out there, but I'm going to be going over the ones that I've brought into our MAT program. So these are the ones with which I'm most familiar. The first one is the Bridge device, which is an FDA cleared, drug-free, non-surgical device that uses neuromodulation, which is just a fancy way of saying technology that acts directly on the nerves. And this is used to aid in the reduction of symptoms associated with opioid withdrawal. Next up is the SoberLink, and this is a handheld device that remotely monitors breath alcohol content. Then we have Opeeka, which uses asynchronous directly observed therapy. And Reset and Reset-O are used for substance use disorder and opioid use disorder, respectively. And they're the first FDA authorized prescription digital therapeutics to improve disease outcomes for these conditions. And last but certainly not least, we have Checkup and Choices, which is a smart recovery tool. And that uses principles of self-empowerment to make it easier to overcome drug and alcohol misuse.
And that's actually really incredible, because not knowing that these even existed, and that's what I really typed into the chat, where this is truly something that everyone should share as much as they can.
Yeah, and I hear a lot of debate about harm reduction versus recovery, and more of the people I talk to are really embracing more of that harm reduction model. So if you're not familiar with harm reduction, it's essentially an attempt to reduce the harm associated with using drugs through a variety of public health interventions. Some examples you might be familiar with are the distribution of Narcan kits to reverse opioid overdose, syringe access programs to provide clean needles to active users, and providing fentanyl test strips. So I don't look at it necessarily as an either or proposition. I look at harm reduction as that very first step in the recovery process. Not everyone is necessarily interested in stopping their drug use, or at least not right now. So the best we can offer them are tools to help them use more safely and help them reduce the spread of diseases like Hep C and HIV. And the interactions that we have with them during the harm reduction phase can provide opportunities for us to build rapport and trust and keep those doors open to possibly accessing treatment at some point in the future. We absolutely need to meet people where they are, but I always tell people we don't want to keep them there. Wherever you are, I will come to you, I will meet you, but you're not staying there. We're going to level it up as we go along. So what we're seeing is that the drugs that are coming into this country, they are evolving. They're more deadly, and we're finding fentanyl now that's not even getting detected by the test strip. So harm reduction is not a fail-safe. It's not, you're not impervious to harm. It reduces some risk, but it does not eliminate it. And it's very important to make that distinction. We also have carfentanil, which I only recently learned of, and it's being mixed in with other illicit drugs. So carfentanil is not a new drug, but it was never intended to be used by people. It's actually a tranquilizer used in veterinary medicine for elephants and other really large animals. So the key difference between fentanyl and carfentanil is the potency. So fentanyl is already pretty deadly. It's 50 to 100 times stronger than morphine, and 2 milligrams is enough to cause overdose and death. So as bad as that is, carfentanil is 100 times more potent than fentanyl. So it only takes the tiniest bit, and the odds that the sample that you take with your pill or your capsule, that small little dose of carfentanil might not be in the portion that you test, or it might not even be detected. We're also seeing people who are combining opioids with the benzodiazepines, and it's coming onto the street. That's a dangerous combination already, but when you do that, and it's called benzodope when you combine the two and put it on the streets like that. So Narcan's effective only in reversing an opioid overdose. If there's another drug in there and there's enough in there to cause an overdose, the Narcan is not going to save that person. So since opioids were bad, but now we're having other things mixed in there. So as we come up with strategies to help people remain safer who are continuing to use, those strategies are now being countered. So harm reduction is still a valuable tool, but recovery is still ultimately where I think we want to get people. So again, I look at harm reduction as just that first step in the recovery process. We will offer the support to people that they're willing to accept, build on those successes, and continue to try to move those people towards recovery.
And I've heard the packet of carfentanil usually would be enough for like one of those sugar packets, could be enough to kill a whole small town of people. Put it in perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and this gives you a frame of reference of what 2 milligrams of fentanyl looks like. So carfentanil is going to be a smaller amount than that. So it does not take much. So we want to help people take that very first step into recovery. And if the person's struggling with opioid use disorder, the first thing I recommend is the bridge device, because with opioids, the symptoms of withdrawal can be so severe that many people continue using just to avoid going through the withdrawal. So my thought was, what if we had something that could help people detox at home, go through withdrawal more comfortably, go through it more quickly? Then I found the bridge device and I was so excited. So this starts to help people feel better in as little as 20 minutes. And a trained medical provider can put this on a patient, behind the patient's ear, in a very short, non-surgical in-office procedure. The device is worn for 5 days and provides continuous relief and works by sending these gentle electrical impulses through the wires to the nerves around the ear. So these stimulated nerves transmit impulses to the brain and dramatically reduce the symptoms of opioid withdrawal. The best part about this device is that 88% of patients who use the bridge, on average, successfully transition into an MET program. So for opioid misuse, this really is quite literally a bridge into recovery. So this is what the bridge looks like, and it can be used anytime there are symptoms of opioid withdrawal. So this can be when someone is going from active use into treatment, transitioning from an opioid medication like buprenorphine over to a non-opioid treatment like naltrexone, or tapering off the medications altogether. Many patients experience an 85% reduction in withdrawal symptoms within 1 hour of wearing the bridge device. And this is determined using the Clinical Opioid Withdrawal Scale, or COWS for short.
There was a quick question in terms of this will really work with opioid addiction. This is why it's FDA approved for that use, benzodiazepine and other alcohol withdrawal. We'll get to that a little later, but this is very specific to opioid.
It is. It just works for opioids. And this is what the COWS scale looks like. And it's a pen and paper method of recording scores on a scale from 0 to 5, with 5 being the most severe. And you're rating on various symptoms, and they're all displayed right here. And the sum score can be used to assess a patient's level of opiate withdrawal, and they can then make inferences about the level of physical dependence on opioids. And this score would also determine the next course of action in treatment. So you can look at the symptoms here. None of these look like very much fun, and people can experience any combination of these and in all different levels of severity. I've heard people describe this as hell on earth. I've had people tell me they would rather die than go through withdrawal again. So we absolutely want to get the bridge device out there to people who have that sentiment. So a COW score that is above 36 reflects that the patient is going through severe opiate withdrawal, whereas a score ranging between 5 and 12 would indicate that the patient is experiencing more mild symptoms. So I want to draw your attention to the moderate planter right there, because on the next slide, we're going to be looking at a person who is being fitted with the bridge device who's going through moderate withdrawal, so we can see just how this person progresses over time. So this is a big drop, and it happens very quickly. Opioid withdrawal happens because a person is physically and psychologically dependent on opioids. This dependence triggers physical symptoms like nausea and muscle pain, and psychological symptoms like anxiety and mood changes like we just saw. The specific timeline of opioid withdrawal depends on the person, their overall health, and the type of opioids that they use. So for example, if someone's using methadone, that's a more long-acting opioid, so it takes longer to leave the body, and a person may notice withdrawal symptoms much later than if they were taking a different opioid. So because it takes longer to leave the body, individuals who are withdrawing from methadone may require an additional 5 days with a new bridge device to get through the entire period of withdrawal. So a person will begin experiencing cravings for opioids shortly after they stop taking them, and usually around the time they would have taken their next dose. An individual trying to abstain from opioids without the bridge device can go through withdrawal that lasts for weeks, and the person will almost always return to use just in order to feel better. The withdrawal process is that painful and that uncomfortable. So when you might say to someone, well, if you really wanted to quit, you'd quit. Why can't you just do this? This is a disease. This is a medical condition, and the person is physiologically and physically dependent on this stuff, and it is torture to try to go through that alone. So they almost always revert back to use, and that is a tremendous barrier in getting people into treatment. You cannot do this by sheer willpower. So because that approach doesn't work, people who have tried it do not want to go through it again. They're absolutely terrified of going through the agony of withdrawal. So there are a lot of folks out there who want to get off of it, but they just aren't sure how to do it. But if you're a provider and you have a bridge device, your patient doesn't have to make that choice. Do I suffer, or do I just continue to use and hope that I don't OD? So here we have a patient who's presenting with moderate symptoms, and we can see that 1 hour after being fitted with the device, they have an 85% reduction in symptoms. Not weeks, not days, but in 1 hour, we're almost there. And this makes a tremendous difference to people who are genuinely suffering. And we can see that at 5 days post-placement, that the score is less than 1. So this person's symptoms are almost completely gone after just 5 days, and then they can make an informed decision about what their treatment is going to look like thereafter.
And Kathleen, that's truly like harm reduction, because you don't know what's in what they're taking. So the next dose or next, fix they get could be the most deadly one that kills them. So
right. Yeah. So to keep using to avoid the withdrawal is right. Even more dangerous proposition now than it was before. So it's an excellent tool. They're only about $600, or they were when I purchased them 2 years ago. So, and people will say, well, there's a lot of cost involved. Not really. I mean, when you look at how much we spend on other things, and we're talking about someone's life, it's a bargain at twice the price, I would say.
Yeah.
And so this device right here is the SoberLink, and it's used to remotely monitor someone's breath alcohol content, and it can keep people connected to their treatment teams and their recovery circles while building accountability and structure, while also documenting their sobriety. So for people with an alcohol use disorder, trust is often broken with the people who are most important in their lives. And using the SoberLink allows them the opportunity to undeniably prove that they have been drinking less, or that they have not been drinking at all. So the SoberLink is FDA cleared, It uses replaceable mouthpieces, so when someone's done using it, it can safely and hygienically be given to another client. It uses facial recognition technology to confirm the identity of the person taking the test, and the testing schedules can be customizable. So for example, if I'm a provider, I might have somebody come in and say, I want you to test at noon, 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. and I'm going to get those results on my dashboard. And so over time, you can see what those drinking patterns are. Maybe this person does really well until Friday night and then they binge. Well, then that gives a treatment team and their support system a chance to really look at that information and develop strategies that can help them make different decisions the next Friday night that rolls around. It goes to the treatment team, but if the patient wants to, they can also allow that information to be shared with other people of their choosing. So that could be someone like their parents, their spouse, maybe their employer, their AA sponsor, just to keep that accountability in place. So again, it can go outside the treatment team, but only if the patient wants to go that route. So here you can see that it's relatively small. It's a portable device. It's discreet, it's tamper resistant, and it has built-in tamper detection. So if you're trying to break it, people are going to know, and there's going to be a discussion there around what you just did. It generates automatic alerts, prompting the user to test, as well as provides daily, weekly, and monthly reports. The test results are admissible in court and can be used in co-parenting, such as someone who wants to spend time alone with their kids, but has to document that they're sober before they're allowed to do that. There are two different models available. The first is the SoberLink Cellular, and this sends tests directly from the device using a cellular connection. So a smartphone is not needed. So this is a really great option for a lot of people that we serve who maybe don't have smartphones. The only limitation is that the person has to be in North America for that option to work. The other model is the SoberLink Connect, and this device pairs with an Apple or Android smartphone and can send test results anywhere at all using the phone's Wi-Fi or cellular data. And this is IMOCA. So by far, the most effective means of ensuring people take their medication as prescribed is something called directly observed therapy, or DOT. But it's not realistic to have the patient come in and take their medication in front of the doctor, nor is that a really good use of the provider's time. So fortunately, we have something like IMOCA. It is HIPAA compliant, and it allows patients to record a short video of themselves taking their medication to submit to their providers through a secure dashboard. So this also allows patients to communicate with their providers and review their progress over time. So within the context of this presentation, we would mostly be using IMOCA to prevent Suboxone diversion when treating somebody with opioid use disorder. So if you're not familiar with diversion, it is where prescription medicines are obtained or used illegally. Suboxone is a controlled substance medication, and it's commonly used for treating opioid use disorder. It's classified as a Schedule III prescription drug, which means that it has an accepted medical use, but it may also cause physical or psychological dependence and has the potential to be abused. So there is a street value to Suboxone. Sometimes patients sell their strips for illicit drugs or for other things. Sometimes they're trying to help their friend who's going through withdrawal, so they will give them their Suboxone strip to help them get over their withdrawal symptoms. But then what happens is the patient runs out of their strips early, and then they end up going through withdrawal themselves, and it is an illegal practice. So we want the medication to only be taken by the person to whom it was prescribed. And using IMOCA allows a provider to make sure that this is exactly what's happening. If the patients are not uploading their videos, then the provider can say, hey, I need you to come in. We're going to do a med count and we're going to do a drug test just to confirm that you are the one taking the medications. If that ends up not to be the case, then the treatment team can have a discussion as to how they want to remedy that, such as maybe we move that person to the Sublocade injection, because the medication can't help somebody if they're not actually taking it. And there are a lot of benefits to using EMOCA. On average, you're going to see adherence of around 94%. And directly observed therapy is the only technique that's going to get you this close to 100. So that being able to document and witness every single dose is how we can ensure that people are staying on track with that. Additionally, providers can document every dose and confirm that the correct technique is being used. With the daily monitoring, they also have the added advantage of identifying any barriers to treatment compliance. If someone's missing multiple doses, we're going to know that right away. And then we can have that discussion with them. What's going on here? What's happening? Do you need more reminders? You can start figuring out a game plan to help that person be more successful. So this alerts you right away of any potential issue with someone taking their medications. It's supported in over 20 languages, which is a tremendous asset for those of us who might be serving more diverse communities. It also has applications outside of substance misuse treatments. It can work for absolutely any medication that is self-administered. You can also report side effects and symptoms with every single dose you take. So again, if there's an issue, you can let your provider know about it right away. The videos are asynchronous. So this allows for added flexibility. So if someone is spending some much needed time out in nature and they don't have a signal, they can take their medication at the designated time and it will be time stamped. So when they are able to actually submit that report, it will indicate that they took it at the appropriate day and time. So this added privacy and convenience makes it pretty easy for patients to stay on top of it and use this application consistently. And then we have Reset and Reset O. So these are fantastic. I had never heard of prescription digital therapeutics before. I didn't know this was a thing, but it's pretty amazing. So you have Reset, which is a 90-day prescription, and this is for substance misuse where opioids is not the primary substance for misuse, and Reset O, which is specifically for people who are misusing opioids. And they operate very similarly, and they both require the use of an Android, iOS tablet, or smartphone. So both Reset and Reset O provide cognitive behavioral therapy, interactive lessons for developing new skills, fluency training, contingency management, as well as craving and trigger assessment. Reset is intended for patients who are at least 18 years old and are currently enrolled in an outpatient treatment under the supervision of a clinician. It's designed to both help increase retention in treatment and abstinence from substances of misuse while they're in that treatment. It's very important to note that this is not intended to be used as a standalone therapy. People should not be using this unless they are under the supervision of a medical provider. Reset O is intended to increase retention of patients with opioid use disorder in outpatient treatment for providing cognitive behavioral therapy as an adjunct to outpatient treatment that includes transmucosal buprenorphine, which is something like Suboxone, and contingency management, which is a type of behavioral therapy in which individuals are reinforced or rewarded for evidence of positive behavioral change. The way that Reset and Reset O works is that the patient has the potential to earn incentives by completing their lessons and having drug tests with expected results. The app has a built-in virtual wheel that they can spin for a chance to win digital gift cards. So there's often a concern around contingency management. We're going to give this person money and we don't know what they're going to buy with the money. And that's a genuine concern that people have around contingency management. With this, it's digital gift cards. So people can shop from Amazon.com and you can work with them to kind of see what they provide so you can offer things that they're more interested in. And our team's very flexible. If you have a limit to the amount that you can spend on that contingency management, like we did, we were restricted by our grant. They built that in on the back end to accommodate our limitations. So very, very accommodating. So the person can spin that virtual wheel and they'll have a chance to win the gift cards. So since it's that intermittent reinforcement schedule, they don't ever know when they're going to get that gift card. It could be the next spin, it could be 10 spins from now. So that's what we're going to use to really reshape that behavior, because they don't know when they're going to get the reward that they want. For those instances where they don't earn the gift card, they get an encouraging message like, keep up the good work, you're doing great. And so we're going to use that whole process to get them to develop new behaviors. So if I'm a patient and I don't know when I'm going to get it, the more good things you do, the more chances you have to spin. So the more drug tests I have with no surprises, the more lessons I complete, the more opportunities I'm going to have to earn that reward. So using it,
I love that, because it's restorative treatment. You know, it's not punitive. It's to restore someone, give their life back, the hope, the moving forward. So that is awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not punishing. If someone comes in with a drug test and it's got some stuff in there that they shouldn't have in there, they don't lose anything. Nothing happens. That they can have a discussion with their doctor, but it just incentivizes the behaviors that we want to see happening. And the dashboard allows the patient to self-report any substance misuse they may have, any triggers, any cravings, and other medications that they might be taking. So this is also where the rewards are tracked, and the providers on that same dashboard can enter information like the results from the drug test screenings. So it just gives you a snapshot of everything that's going on there. And the final assistive technology that we're going to be going over is Checkup and Choices. So this is a confidential, self-led online platform that uses the smart recovery principles. It's clinically proven, and their website app works on any internet connected device, so you can use it anytime, anywhere. The online program has two parts. The first is the checkup, and this gives personalized feedback from a clinically validated assessment. The Choices program supports the change the user decides to make, either to quit or to cut back, so that they can live the life they want. So if someone's struggling with alcohol and they're kind of borderline, and the checkup part will help them kind of determine if I have a real issue with drinking, if it's kind of borderline, then that person can decide, what do I want to do? Maybe I still want to drink on the weekends and for special occasions when I'm with my friends, but I don't need to have 4 beers every single night. So they can choose abstinence, or they can choose a reduced use approach. The Choices programs are structured and guided with cognitive behavioral and motivational exercises to help people achieve and maintain their sobriety. So, and there are individual modules on alcohol, opioids, cannabis, and stimulants, and you'll have access to all of these if you have an account. It is accessible, it's research-based and clinically validated, that supports recovery and complements any professional treatment the person might already be receiving. The included exercises help in dealing with triggers and urges to get and stay sober. The program is both empowering and non-judgmental, and it does not tell the person what to do. That's one of the real appeals of this, is it doesn't sit there and say, this is what you have to do, this is how you need to do it. The person will, that allows them to answer the questions more honestly, to get a more valid assessment of how things are actually going. And then they make the decision of what they want to do from there. So whether the individual is interested in abstinence or reduced use, they're supported in whatever they decide. And there's always the option to switch. If I'm going to do reduced use with alcohol and I'm doing really well, and I think I can do this, I can stop this entirely, I can switch over to the abstinence module. If that's where I start and I decide this is too hard, I don't want to fail completely, I'm going to dial it back, and I'm just going to start with some reduced use and stay there for a while and see how that goes. So it's very, very flexible. All the information that people enter into this platform is 100% confidential. Nobody sees it. There's no provider dashboard. It's just for the eyes of the person who's using this tool. So they can take the information they get from these lessons and present that to their doctor or to their counselor or their peer support, share what they've learned, get feedback, maybe adjust their treatment approach as they progress, but that's entirely up to them. And it's not required necessarily that the person be enrolled in a treatment program. For some folks, this might be all they access. This might be the springboard to help someone realize that they need additional services. So you can just use this as a standalone resource if you want to. So as I mentioned earlier, it uses a smart recovery platform, which is an alternative to the more traditional 12 steps like Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. The main difference is that this approach is purely science-based. There is no religious or spiritual component. There's no sponsor. And the mentality is different. So rather than in AA where the person has to say that they are powerless before their addiction, this approach says, it focuses on self-reliance and says you already have everything you need inside of you to succeed at this. So it's just a different mindset. A lot of people have tremendous success with the 12-step programs, but there's no single approach that works for everybody. I've talked to people who've tried 12 steps, it didn't really work. And so they think there's nothing for them where they can have that support. This is another option. And so there's a lot of people who have a lot of strong supporters with the SMART recovery approach as well. So if one approach doesn't work for someone, there's always an alternative. We're always looking for options. We're always looking for answers. So as much variety as we can provide, the more likely we are to find a good fit for everybody. So SMART Recovery is a 4-point program that offers tools and techniques for success at each step of the way. These points are building and maintaining motivation, coping with urges, managing thoughts and feelings and behaviors, and living a more balanced life. We all know that substance misuse affects a lot of families, and there can be a ripple effect from one generation to the next. And we often talk about different cycles, the cycle of addiction, the cycle of violence, the cycle of poverty. So how did we find ourselves here, and how do we get ourselves out of it? What can we do to help break all of these cycles? When we see someone who's struggling with substances, that typically is just the tip of the iceberg. There are a lot of layers under there that we are not seeing. So maybe there's unresolved trauma, mental illness, maybe they're lonely. There are a lot of different things that can cause someone to misuse substances. So if we look at this for a minute, we can see all the different layers under there. For example, people might commit crimes because of their substance use disorder, which may lead them to go to prison. When they're released, they often don't have anywhere to go and they become homeless. So it's not hard to imagine that that person might return to use, and they might engage in other criminal activities as well. In a different scenario, we might have an expectant mom who's using drugs and the baby is born with neonatal abstinence syndrome. Kids who are born with NAS are more likely to have developmental delays and speech and language impairments in early childhood. So these things can impact their learning and their socialization as they get older. So if this mom ends up being unable to care for her child because of her drug use, and this kid ends up going into foster care and they're getting transitioned from one foster home to another throughout their entire childhood and adolescence, one, that's a traumatic experience all by itself. And then what happens to that kid when they age out of the system? Where's their support network? Where do they go from there? So if that's someone's life growing up, it's not a stretch to assume that that person's probably going to use substances themselves. So now we've passed that down to the next generation and that cycle continues. So again, there are a lot of different reasons that lead people to misusing substances, but something that often is a factor are adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs for short. And some examples of ACEs are physical abuse and neglect, emotional and sexual abuse, having a family member attempt or die by suicide, growing up with substance misuse in the home, having a family member who experiences mental health challenges, growing up and witnessing violence in the home or in the community, having your parents be separated or divorced, or having a parent who's been incarcerated. These are all traumatic experiences. And according to SAMHSA, the experience of trauma can be described through some common elements, and they break them down into what they call the 3 E's, and that's events, experiences, and effects. And these elements address the uniqueness of an individual's response to an event and how an event affects one's future behavior and well-being. So the event is the trauma itself. It is objective and it is measurable. The experience is subjective and it's difficult to measure because this has to do with how someone reacts to the event itself. Two people can experience the same thing and respond in completely different ways. The person's response can be influenced by a number of different factors, including their age, gender, and their culture. At the same time, the person's overall resilience and risk and protective factors may also contribute to how they experience this event. The effects are essentially the reactions to the event and the ways the experience influences that person's future behavior. These can be things like having flashbacks, being hypervigilant, avoidance behaviors, having an extreme fight, flight, or freeze response. So experiencing trauma doesn't just affect the person's behavior. Traumatic events can have a significant negative impact on brain chemistry and physical and hormonal changes. It's critical for providers to take a trauma-informed and trauma-responsive approach in caring for your patients because they present with a substance use disorder. There's a lot of other things going on potentially, so we want to always be aware and sensitive to that. The more ACEs someone has, the more of an impact it's likely going to have on them. The impacts of ACEs include negative impacts on your health, both physically and mentally, being less socially stable and having a higher likelihood of engaging in higher risk behaviors, and unfortunately also having a shorter life expectancy. The good news is that we have the knowledge and tools needed to help people today. And I am a huge supporter of making MAT and assistive technologies available to individuals who are in corrections, who are in residential treatment, and who are homeless. We cannot expect people to be successful if we don't provide them with what they need to get there. The transitions are absolutely key. And unfortunately, this is a critical step that often gets ignored or it's just not given the degree of attention that it deserves. If someone is returning to the community after being incarcerated, do they have a place to go? Do they have transportation? Do they have a skill to get a job? Do they need treatment? I'm currently the president of our reentry coalition out here, and the first question I ask is, who is picking these people up? When they get out of prison, who is getting them? Is it the person they used to commit crimes with, do drugs with? Is it their drug dealer? Because if that's who's getting them, you're going to fail. There's no way around it. We have to have something better in place. We need a safe person to pick them up, to take them somewhere where they're going to get exactly what they need, so we don't see them again in the correctional system. In a different example, if someone's leaving intensive treatment and they no longer need that higher level of services, and are we connecting them to a lower level of treatment? Or are we saying to them, thanks for coming in for our services. We can't help you with this next stretch of your recovery journey. Best of luck to you. Because if that's what we're doing, they might not navigate that well on their own. And if it's not already pre-coordinated, there could be a lapse in the treatment that they need. And that's when we're going to have an increased risk of that person relapsing. So once people are stable and they're doing well, they've gone through their treatment, they're in a comfortable stage of recovery, what I would like to see happen is that we automatically start connecting them to education and workforce opportunities so that they can get a job and become financially self-sufficient and still have the ability to access care if and when they need it. So the goal is to have them be able to stand on their own 2 feet, living the life that they want to live. Again, we always want to meet people where they are, but we need to be intentional with the transition so that we can better ensure that our folks are fully supported during each step of the way to reduce those risks for relapse and recidivism. To really make a positive, lasting impact, we have to look at the underlying causes and risk factors for the person's substance misuse. For example, if a veteran with PTSD who's living with substance use disorder comes in for treatment, are we just treating the addiction piece by prescribing Suboxone? Or are they also being offered behavioral health care to address the PTSD? So we can give them the medication to manage the addiction, but that's not all that's there. They still have that trauma from combat, whatever they went through. And we need to be able to help that person process what happened to them. So in the future, not only are they feeling better and doing better? They have developed the tools that they need to be successful down the road with not returning to the substance misuse. Are we connecting them to the right support groups? Are we connecting them to outside entities that can meet the needs of that person that maybe we can't? No single program or clinic can do everything. So you've got to know who your partners are. You've got to talk. You've got to have that collaborative spirit, because this is somebody's life that we're talking about. So we need to make sure that we are connecting with the people we need to connect with so that this person is getting as fully supported as possible. We want to focus on the transitions. We want to embrace innovation. Treatment options have come a really long way, which is exciting, but there are still gaps and there are still barriers. Using different technologies can help us get people into treatment, monitor their drinking and medication adherence, monitor their drug use, and provide 24/7 online recovery, education, and support. No matter how good our services are, no matter how good our providers are, people will continue to have needs outside of their time with us. Their needs don't stop at 5 o'clock. Their needs exist outside that 1 hour that they might see you in a week or in a month. So we have to build that in. Our jobs are hard. If you work in this field, you know what I'm talking about. And more is being asked of providers all the time. You're being asked to do more and more with less and less. There's been a lot of people quitting, especially during COVID. There's shortages all over, and we're putting a lot of burden on the people who stay. So adopting some of these things can really, it might seem like extra work. It's one more thing to monitor, but you can keep track of a lot more. You can help support that person, and it helps you use your time a lot more effectively and a lot more efficiently. So at the end of the day, we're here because we care and because we want to help people. Ultimately, if something isn't working the way we want it to, if it's not working the way that we believe it should, it's time to try something new, and we shouldn't be afraid to look outside the confines of what typically has always been done, because what has typically been done has gotten us to where we are. We have good tools. We have MET. It's very effective, but what can we use to take it up a notch? Because there's a lot more improvement that needs to happen. The epidemic that we're facing with the drugs is something where we just cannot afford to fail. So the take-home message is think outside the box. There are solutions all around us. We just have to find them. And I will leave this slide up for a few minutes if you are interested in getting the QR codes, and you can visit these websites directly. I thank you all very much for your time and appreciate you spending this hour with us. And if you have any questions, Ken and I will be happy to answer them.
Kathleen, that was amazing. And I entered as much as I could to throughout the session, but this is absolutely another means how important it is to use technology to assist. And people can actually unmute themselves. I saw that done last session, and Amy said, thank you, great information. Amy works for the state that I'm moving towards, not the state of confusion, but the state of California. Amy, do you want to unmute yourself? Because you actually are working in the, some of the questions that popped up during the entire hour, oh, you can unmute yourself, Ari said, was that, can they get a copy of the slide deck presentation?
Absolutely.
Should we put our emails in there if people have any questions, or where they can reach you?
Sure, I will go ahead and exit out of this slide. And then when I mail the presentation, you can have access to the QR code. So I will go ahead and put my work email in the chat box right now.
I always chuckle when I see all the faces. I guess people are on this call a little younger than I am. So if they remember the Brady Bunch, here's a story. Christy.
Yeah, sorry. I was also asking, like, there's an option to save the chat. Is there any way to send that chat out with the PowerPoint as well? Because there was a lot of stuff. Can
I talk to a friend of mine? I'm gonna call on a friend. Jerome, could you?
They said I can download the chat myself. Great.
Absolutely. Isn't that great? Technology not getting in the way, but helping us out.
Yeah, that's a great question. You can click on the 3 dots on the top of the chat, I think. So in the box where you write, says save chat. That's a good question.
Yep.
Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, that's great. That's why I said collaboration is the key. Kathleen, you just really, nailed it. We can't do this alone. No one has the single solution. And I put in the chat that when you said the cost of, again, we're not saying one item, one device or one strategy is the best, but when you look at the cost of detox and not being necessarily successful, it goes from $400 a day to up to $1,000. I gave the where I found that particular factoid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the ways I was able to get the bridge, and it was a COVID specific grant on how to continue providing services during the pandemic. So I tell people this was kind of my foot in the door. Without the pandemic, I don't know that I would have had the same leverage to get all these different technologies in there. But because of COVID, there were restrictions on how many people could be in a detox center. So I was able to make a pitch for including the bridge devices. So at least people who were just dealing with opioids could withdraw safely at home and not, being exposed to other people. Same thing with the sober link. So now that we've done these things and we're showing that they work, my hope is that it carries on well past COVID, and this just becomes part of how we do things moving ahead.
So in spite of a worldwide pandemic, and you did this in a very, very short period of time. So talk about giving someone a hope to try something different. I say we all get rid of the box. We recycle it or repurpose it in some way or form, but be creative. I put a skill sketch where when I presented with the folks in Idaho, the parent network, they seem to really like that. So sharing is caring, and collaboration, I haven't found a phrase for you. Collaboration is cool.
Works for me.
Thank you, Kathleen. You're so kind. And we have about 2 more minutes. Otherwise, if not, we can give that time back. Chrissy says thank you, and everyone, yay! Because again, we're in it to win it, and it really can. It really can save life. And again, I put in there early on that the loss of life or addiction impacts everyone. I believe I can say that fairly closely. And for me, having lost 2 cousins not that long ago to their addiction, it just has to stop.
I really appreciate having the platform to get this information out to people I probably would not have ever connected with otherwise. So thank you to TCOM for allowing me to be here and present alongside Ken. This has been just a fantastic opportunity, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
You are now officially part of the collaborative. Amber wrote, "Stop, collaborate, and listen" is vanilla ice.